Which personal tragedy helped JK Rowling shape the idea of the wizarding world? What are Joanne's biggest regrets about the Harry Potter movies? And who was supposed to be Hermione's true love according to Rowling's original plan? Hi, I'm Dylan. Here's the true story of how the Harry Potter franchise was created and evolved from day one. Facing dark magic in the real world. As may well be imagined, creating the story of the boy who lived wasn't an easy process. But what you probably don't know is how much personal drama lies at the root of the Harry Potter universe. Little Joanne was already writing stories at the age of 6 and constantly telling them to her younger sister. Years later, in her 2008 Harvard University commencement speech, Rowling revealed,
"I was convinced that the only thing I wanted to do, ever, was write novels."
Although Joanne never had to live in the cupboard under the stairs, she faced some major struggles throughout her teenage years. Being a daydreamer with her nose in books all the time, she was often bullied in school. "I wasn't particularly happy. I think it's a dreadful time of life," she told The New Yorker. But the worst thing happened when Rowling was 15 years old. Her mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and a 10-year battle with this dreadful disease took a toll on all of the family. Her parents insisted that Joanne should have a proper, stable job. So after graduating from college, she was stuck with translation and secretarial work. But the only thing she ever liked about working in offices was being able to type up stories on the computer when no one was looking. Those were really dark times for her. But we know that after the darkest time comes the brightest light. One day, when a 25-year-old Joanne waited for a delayed train from Manchester to London's King's Cross station, an idea of a boy who discovered a magical world of witches and wizards suddenly came to her. It came literally out of nowhere. She just saw Harry very clearly and got a very special kind of feeling.
It was that incredibly elated feeling you get when you've just met someone with whom you might eventually fall in love.
She soon sketched out a rough plan for a book series featuring a boy wizard, but unfortunately she didn't have time to work on the story. Tragically, less than 6 months later, on New Year's Day, Joanne got the most traumatizing news of her life. "I had that kind of white noise panic in my head, but could not grasp the enormity of my mother having died," the author shared later. But the odd thing is that this event shaped Harry Potter's story in many respects. The increasingly dark tone of the series, Harry being an orphan, and his grappling with such a serious issue like death is in fact very much autobiographical.
If she hadn't died, I don't think it's too strong to say there wouldn't be Harry Potter. There wouldn't, the books are what they are because she died, because I loved her and she died. That's why they are what they are.
But as devastated by her mother's demise as she was, Rowling couldn't continue writing. She sank into a deep depression, and in hopes of digging herself out of her sorrow, she took a job teaching English in Portugal. Her goal in venturing abroad was to get away from her troubles, and more importantly, use her time off to work on her book. But things did not go as planned. It took a whole 5 years from the original idea to finish the first book. Finding inspiration in poverty and depression. Joanne Rowling loved teaching English to Portuguese students, mainly because she had mornings free for writing. It seemed like life was starting to get better, and the story about the boy who lived was about to see the world. But yet another dramatic experience shook Joanne. She met her first husband, and although her marriage was short and catastrophic, Rowling says she would do it all over again to have her oldest daughter, Jessica. At the end of 1993, she moved back to Britain with her baby, straight into poverty and depression. Despite struggling to make ends meet, Rowling kept on working on her story, and her Portugal suitcase was full of papers with stories and pictures of magical creatures of the wizard world.
That was Argus Filch. No prizes. Snape, obviously. That is Harry arriving in Privet Drive with Professor McGonagall and Hagrid and Dumbledore. That was a Gringotts cart.
Moreover, in Britain, she managed to turn her darkest thoughts into inspiration and created the most fearful creatures of the franchise, the soul-sucking Dementors.
It's that cold absence of feeling, that really hollowed out feeling. That's what the Dementors are.
Joanne did everything she could to finish her book as soon as possible. She often walked around Edinburgh waiting till Jessica fell asleep in her pushchair, and then she would literally run to the nearest cafe and write for as long as the baby stayed asleep. Failure meant a stripping away of the inessential, she recalled. "I began to direct all my energy into finishing the only work that mattered to me." Finally, she had a manuscript to send off, only to have it rejected. Dreams come true, with a little help. Oh yes, finishing the book was only the beginning. Now Joanne needed a publisher. Her first attempt ended in rejection, as did the second and third. The consistent criticism was that it's far too long for children. Incredibly, the book was turned down 12 times before finally a small British company, Bloomsbury, finally gave it the green light. And that happened thanks to the editor's 8-year-old daughter. The girl loved the opening chapters so much that she begged to read the whole thing.
That moment when he told me that Bloomsbury wanted to take the book, second only to the birth of my daughter, was the happiest moment of my life.
Bloomsbury were not overwhelmingly optimistic about Harry Potter, and the first book had a print run of 1,000 copies. But once Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone appeared on the shelves, it proved to be a hit. Protecting Harry's world at all costs. In 1998, Rowling signed a 7-figure deal with Warner Brothers, just months after the second book had been released. Despite the success of the novels, it was still a risk for the movie studio, because no one knew at the time when or how the series would end. Moreover, Rowling was fiercely loyal and protective of her vision of Harry's world. She made significant demands over details, like casting only British actors. She wanted to make sure the actors didn't use fake British accents so that the authenticity of the movies and characters remained untarnished. Amazingly, even the late great Robin Williams couldn't get the part of Hagrid, although he was hugely interested in it. Also, she assisted the screenwriter, ensuring that the Harry Potter films stayed faithful to her story and did not contradict future books in the series. However, the studio didn't agree to Rowling's first choice for the director. She wanted to hire Terry Gilliam, but Chris Columbus was chosen instead. Still, she got an unprecedented creative control over the Hollywood films, which never happened before, and even became a producer on the final 2-part installment, The Deathly Hallows. By the way, did you know that Joanne Rowling was asked to play Harry's mother Lily? Amazingly, she turned down the offer as she did not feel she was cut out to be an actress. The author's control over the films definitely served well for the franchise, because not all of the books had been published yet, so there was a lot of stuff that nobody but Rowling could know. That's how we got those amazing Easter eggs in all of the movies. For example, the image of the Deathly Hallows can be spotted already in The Goblet of Fire, long before anybody first heard of them. Rowling also created many details specifically for the screen adaptations, like the Black family tree with over 70 names on it. But guess what was the most exciting way she used her influence as a creative consultant? It turns out Joanne Rowling secretly gave Alan Rickman some insider information about his character that would only be revealed to fans many years later. As Harry Potter movie producer David Heyman admits, it was quite amusing, because there were times when a director would tell Alan what to do in a scene, and the actor would say something like, "No, I can't do that. I know what's going to happen and you don't." And if you are wondering what the secret was, here's the answer. The author told him what exactly lies behind the word always. But despite being deeply involved in the making of the Harry Potter films, there were still some details Joanne Rowling wasn't happy with. Rowling had some regrets about her novel's adaptation. In order to adapt the hefty books for the screen, some details understandably had to be spared. If all of them were included into the films, they would last for over 6 hours each. One such compromise was leaving Dobby out of The Goblet of Fire, while Winky and the Rights of the Elves organization was left out of the movies entirely. Rowling believed the story of the House of Elves to be a very important part of the series, but eventually agreed with the screenwriter's decision. But there was a scene that Rowling defended passionately. In The Deathly Hallows Part 2, the screenwriter wanted Snape to duel with Harry instead of McGonagall. He thought that it would add more weight to the scene when Harry learns about Snape's eternal love for his mother. However, Rowling insisted on giving the head of Gryffindor, McGonagall, her moment.
I don't like the marginalization of women when the fighting breaks out. You know, we get to fight too.
But there's one thing about the Harry Potter movies that Joanne regrets. Incredibly, after the final installments hit the screen, the author revealed that she had second thoughts about whom Hermione should have married. "I wrote the Hermione and Ron relationship as a form of wish fulfillment," she said. "It was a choice I made for very personal reasons, not for reasons of credibility." So yes, millions of Potterheads had a point. Hermione and Harry would be a better fit. And there was also a moment that many fans found to be quite controversial. When Joanne Rowling and Daniel Radcliffe sat down for a one-on-one conversation several years after the last film premiered, many observers felt like Rowling was critical of Emma Watson portraying Hermione. She said that Emma was very beautiful, not a gawky, geeky, ugly duckling she had in her mind. So Joanne just kind of had to go, "Oh, okay, it's a film, deal with it." Some of the fans were outraged by such comments, but the fact is that they didn't pay attention to the other part of the interview where Rowling expressed her affection of Emma.
It was really lucky I spoke to Emma first on the phone before I met her, because I fell absolutely in love with her.
Besides, it's no secret that the author based Hermione on her 11-year-old self, and if she ever had real doubts about Watson, she would definitely have spoken up at the time of her casting. Which details in the Harry Potter movies do you think were adapted inappropriately? Don't be shy to share with us in the comments. and thank you for staying with OSSA Movies.